I never thought a wedding could feel like a battlefield. I stood in the sprawling garden of my brother's lavish celebration, champagne glass in hand, pretending to enjoy the symphony of laughter, clinking glasses, and cheery music. But my mind was elsewhere. Love, I had decided long ago, wasn't for me. Not after the long, quiet fade of a relationship I thought would last forever. I had given up on romance. My heart was fortified, insulated against longing and vulnerability. And then I saw him. He wasn't supposed to be there. Not for me. Yet somehow, amid the sea of smiling faces, there was Franklin, sitting alone at a corner table, his gaze fixed on the floor, the curve of his mouth betraying a tension I recognized too well. I felt my chest tighten without warning, a reflex I had sworn off years ago. The first collision happened almost by accident. I reached for a bottle of water, slipping past a waiter, and my elbow nudged his chair. He looked up, startled, and our eyes met. Deep brown eyes, flecked with something tender yet jagged. Broken pieces of a story I instantly wanted to understand. "I'm so sorry," I said, stepping back. My voice sounded strange even to me, hesitant and rough around the edges. "It's okay," he murmured, but his voice carried a weight I couldn't ignore, like he was carrying a storm inside him and trying to hold it at bay. I lingered awkwardly, unsure why I couldn't just leave. Every instinct screamed that I should. Weddings were minefields for unwanted emotions, and yet there was something magnetic about him. He introduced himself with a small, almost shy smile. "Franklin. Lennox," I replied, a name that felt clunky on my tongue, but somehow, as he looked at me, it felt right. We didn't talk much at first. I watched him from across the garden, from under the shade of a flowering magnolia tree, and noticed the subtle ways he flinched at laughter that was too loud, the way he fiddled with the napkin in his lap, and the distant sadness in his eyes. I wanted to know what had carved those shadows into his heart. It wasn't long before the inevitable pulled us together. The bouquet toss erupted into chaos behind me, the guests laughing and scrambling, when a wayward bouquet sailed past and knocked Franklin's chair. I grabbed his arm instinctively, steadying him. "You've got a knack for saving people," he said, a dry humor threading through his voice. His lips quirked into a faint smile, though his eyes remained wary. "And you've got a knack for looking like you need saving," I replied without thinking, my own lips twitching against my will. The moment was fleeting, but the spark lingered, invisible but undeniable. I kept finding myself nearby, under the pretense of checking on other guests, stealing glimpses at him while pretending to adjust my tie or comment to a friend about the hors d'oeuvres. By the time the dinner plates arrived, our small dance of glances and awkward proximity had escalated. He laughed softly at a joke my brother made, and the sound struck me like a bell, clear and piercing. I realized I hadn't heard a laugh that pure in months, maybe years. I wanted to hear it again. Later, as the sun dipped behind the rolling hills, painting the sky in muted shades of rose and gold, I found him alone again, standing near the edge of the garden, the soft breeze tugging at his hair. "You left the party," I said, walking toward him cautiously. "I needed some air," he replied, his tone even, but his eyes flickered with something fragile, exposed. I didn't have to ask why. Some pain doesn't need words. It's written in posture, in gestures, in the way someone avoids eye contact while carrying an invisible burden. "You okay?" I asked, surprising myself. My heart thumped against my ribs, louder than I'd like to admit. He looked at me then, really looked, and something in his expression cracked. A single tremor of emotion, barely contained. "Not really," he admitted, voice low. He stopped, swallowed. "I didn't expect to be here tonight. Not like this. Seeing everyone happy, it reminds me of everything I've lost." I felt a strange pull, an urge to reach out and close the distance between our worlds. "I know that feeling," I said softly. "I've been there. Sometimes it feels like your heart isn't yours anymore, like it belongs to someone who already walked away." His shoulders slumped as if a weight had lifted slightly, though his pain was far from gone. He looked at me with a vulnerability I wasn't prepared for. "How do you move on from that?" I shrugged, feeling the irony. "I don't think you do. You survive it. You let it shape you, not define you. And sometimes someone unexpected comes along and makes the edges a little softer." His eyes widened, as if my words struck a chord he didn't know existed. I wasn't sure if I was speaking too soon, too boldly, but the heat of the moment demanded honesty. "You're saying there's hope?" he asked, a hint of skepticism mixed with longing. "I'm saying," I said, stepping closer, my voice low, "that sometimes the person who needs saving is right in front of you, and you just don't realize it until you look up." He laughed quietly, a short, incredulous sound, and for a heartbeat, the world felt suspended. I wanted to reach out, touch his hand, tell him that none of the walls he had built mattered here, not with me. And then he did something unexpected. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against mine, eyes closed, and whispered, "I think I like you, Lennox." My chest seized. The world spun, bright and terrifying. "I think I like you too," I admitted, barely above a whisper. The moment stretched, fragile yet electric, until a gust of wind swept through the garden, reminding us both of reality, the music, the guests, the celebration around us. But the connection lingered, a tether between our hearts that neither of us could ignore. Over the next few days, our conversations deepened. We found excuses to talk, to meet in quieter corners away from the prying eyes of family and friends. Franklin's pain was raw, but I was patient. I listened when he spoke about past heartbreaks, about love lost and trust betrayed. And I shared pieces of my own story, carefully, selectively, letting him see the scars I had long tried to hide. One evening, we walked along the edge of the lake near the reception venue. The sky was a canvas of deep indigo, stars beginning to pierce the night. The air smelled of pine and lingering celebration. "You really believe people can love again?" Franklin asked, voice barely audible over the gentle lapping of water against the shore. "I do," I said, and I meant it. "I believe people can heal, and that when it happens, it's not about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who understands your broken pieces and still wants to stay." He was silent for a long moment, then smiled softly, eyes glimmering with something I couldn't name. Hope, perhaps, or the tentative start of trust. "Maybe I can try," he said. And that was enough. In that fragile beginning, I realized that love wasn't about grand gestures or flawless timing. It was about the quiet bravery of showing up, even when you were afraid. And in Franklin's eyes, I saw the reflection of my own fear and longing mirrored back at me, a promise that perhaps, just perhaps, I hadn't given up on love after all. The morning after the wedding, the garden felt like a memory I could almost reach out and touch. The laughter had faded, the clinking glasses gone, leaving only the whisper of wind through the trees and the soft hum of the city in the distance. Franklin was sitting on the patio steps, hands wrapped around a coffee mug, staring at nothing. I walked over slowly, careful not to startle him. "Morning," I said, my voice softer than I intended. He glanced up, and for a moment, there was that same flicker of guardedness I had seen the night before. Then he smiled, tentative, fragile, but it was there. "Morning," he replied. We sat together in a companionable silence, the kind that doesn't need words but somehow says everything. I noticed how his shoulders relaxed a little as the sun warmed his face, and I thought about the way people carry their pain, like stones in a backpack they don't know how to set down. "You drink coffee like a philosopher," he said, breaking the quiet. I laughed lightly, or a desperate college student trying to make it through life. He smiled wider this time, and it was like the first real light I'd seen in him. I like that. Desperate, but still alive. That was Franklin in a nutshell, fragile, careful, but undeniably alive. I felt the pull to be near him, to be part of whatever healing he needed. But I knew better than to rush. Love like this didn't thrive on haste. It grew in small, quiet moments, the way rivers carve valleys over centuries. By the time my brother called me to help with the leftover wedding gifts, Franklin was following me reluctantly, a bag of trinkets dangling from his hand. He laughed when a rogue ribbon tangled around his fingers. "I don't think I've done something this mundane since, well, I can't remember when." I grinned at him. Life's little mundane things are better with company. He looked at me, really looked, and I saw something shift in his gaze. A hint of trust, a willingness to let me in, even just a sliver. "Maybe you're right," he said softly. And then, just like that, a crack appeared in the armor around his heart. The kind of crack that doesn't scream, but whispers, and if you're careful, you can slip through. Over the next week, our connection deepened. We found excuses to meet, coffee runs, quick walks through the city, even grocery store trips that somehow turned into long conversations about dreams, regrets, and favorite books. Every word, every glance, every touch was a thread weaving us closer together. Franklin's smile became easier, more frequent, and I felt a thrill every time it reached his eyes, because it wasn't just polite or social. It was real. One evening, he invited me to his apartment under the pretense of helping him unpack a box of old records. The room smelled faintly of vanilla candles and something musky I couldn't name. He shuffled through crates of vinyl, his movements careful, almost ritualistic. "Do you ever think about the past too much?" I asked, leaning against the doorway. He paused, fingers hovering over a record sleeve. "All the time," he admitted. "But sometimes the past is the only thing that feels safe. Safer than this." His gaze met mine, hesitant but searching. "This," I said, stepping closer, "is where things get interesting, where things start to feel alive, even if it's scary." He let out a soft laugh, shaking his head. "You're fearless, Lennox." "Not fearless," I corrected him, "just stubborn enough to keep trying." We sat on the floor, legs brushing, hands occasionally touching while sorting through the music. The tension between us was palpable, a mix of longing and fear. Every time our fingers grazed, I felt a spark, a reminder of the night in the garden, of that first moment we admitted our feelings. Franklin finally set down a record and looked at me. "I don't know if I can do this," he whispered. "Do what?" I asked softly, my heart hammering. "Thesis," he said. "I don't know if I can risk," his words faltered, and he looked away, biting his lip. "You can't," I said firmly, cupping his chin gently so he'd meet my gaze. "I'll be patient. I'll be careful. I just want to be with you, Franklin. That's all I know." The weight in his chest seemed to ease, if only slightly, and he leaned into my hand. "I want that too," he admitted, voice trembling. And in that moment, everything shifted. A fragile hope began to take root, fragile but defiant, like the first shoots of grass through concrete. The next few weeks were a dance of careful intimacy. We went to late-night diners, wandered city streets under neon lights, and discovered quiet spots in parks where we could sit and talk without the world intruding. Every conversation revealed new layers, his fears, his regrets, his hidden tenderness. Every glance, every touch, reinforced the bond that was forming between us, delicate but persistent. One rainy evening, we found ourselves huddled under a small awning, drenched from head to toe, laughing at the absurdity of being soaked through in the middle of a city street. He looked at me, water dripping from his hair, and I saw that spark of mischief, that vulnerability, that softness I'd come to cherish. "You're impossible," he said, shaking his head but smiling. "And yet, you follow me anyway," I teased, grabbing his hand as lightning flashed across the sky. He squeezed my hand, and for the first time, I didn't see the guarded walls, the fractured heart. I saw him, whole, human, and ready, maybe, to let someone in. But love wasn't without complications. Franklin's past was a shadow that clung to him, a constant reminder of heartbreak and betrayal. There were nights when he withdrew, when his laughter faded, and I could feel the storm brewing behind his eyes. I learned to wait, to hold space for him without pushing, to let him decide when he was ready to let go of the pain he carried. One evening, as we sat on his balcony, the city lights shimmering below us, he finally spoke about the heartbreak that had scarred him. "I thought I'd never trust anyone again," he said, voice low. "I thought love was just a trap, a promise that always breaks. And then I met you, and his words faltered, and he looked at me with a vulnerability that took my breath away. I don't know how to do this without running away." I took his hand, holding it tightly. "You don't have to do it alone. I'll be here. We'll figure it out together." Tears welled in his eyes, and he leaned into me, resting his head on my shoulder. In that moment, the world felt right, even if just for a heartbeat. The real challenge came unexpectedly. One evening, my brother invited us both to a family gathering. Dinner, laughter, the usual chaos. Franklin was nervous, and I could feel it in the way he fidgeted with his cufflinks, the way he avoided eye contact with my relatives. "Don't worry," I whispered as we entered. "I've got you." And I did. I stayed close, introducing him, guiding him through the labyrinth of familial expectations, and shielding him from probing questions. By the end of the night, he was laughing genuinely, letting go of some of the tension he carried. Later, as we walked home under the streetlights, he stopped, taking both my hands in his. "I was scared tonight," he admitted. "I didn't know if I could face everyone, if I could beam." "You were," I said firmly. "And that's enough. You don't have to pretend or hide. Not with me." His smile was soft, full of warmth and gratitude. "You really mean that?" "Absolutely," I replied, pulling him close. "I don't just like you, Franklin. I care about you. Every part of you." And he leaned into me, resting his forehead against mine. "I care about you too, Lennox. More than I can say." It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of doubt, nights when the past crept back in, whispers of fear and insecurity. But there was also progress, growth, the quiet victories that mattered more than grand declarations. Every laugh, every shared secret, every touch strengthened the fragile bond between us. One night, weeks later, we sat on Franklin's balcony again, wrapped in blankets, the city stretching beneath us like a sea of lights. "You know," he said quietly, "I never thought I'd get a second chance at love. Not really. I thought my heart was broken beyond repair." I took his hand, squeezing it gently. "Sometimes it just takes someone to believe in you, to see the pieces and still want to stay." He smiled, a real, genuine smile, and leaned into me. "Then thank you for staying," he whispered. And in that quiet, fragile night, I realized something profound. Love wasn't about never being hurt. It wasn't about flawless timing or perfect circumstances. It was about showing up, even when scared. It was about trusting someone with the pieces of yourself you thought were unlovable. And I had found that in Franklin. We were two broken hearts, tentatively mending together, learning that healing wasn't linear, that love wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Every step, every laugh, every tear, every quiet moment together was proof that love could exist, even after heartbreak. And for the first time in years, I felt something I had thought impossible. Hope. Hope that we could survive the past, embrace the present, and maybe, just maybe, build a future together. The weeks turned into months, and what started as a tentative connection had become a rhythm, a daily comfort. Franklin and I learned each other's habits. The way he drank his coffee black in the morning, the way he hummed softly when he was nervous, the small gestures that made him who he was. And I, in turn, shared pieces of myself I hadn't dared to show anyone for years. One chilly evening, we walked along the river walk, the lights reflecting like fractured diamonds on the water's surface. Franklin shivered, and I draped my jacket over his shoulders without a word. He looked up at me, eyes glimmering in the lamplight. "You always know what to do," he murmured. "Not always," I admitted, "but I do know I want to be with you. That's a start, isn't it?" He laughed softly, leaning into me. "It's more than a start. It's everything." The real test came unexpectedly, in the form of my brother's engagement party, another celebration, another swirl of family and expectation. Franklin was hesitant, and I could feel the tension radiating from him as we arrived. "You'll be fine," I whispered, squeezing his hand. "I'll be right here." We navigated the crowd together, side by side. I could see the relief in his expression as people greeted him warmly. No judgment, no questions about the past. It was a small victory, but significant. For Franklin, it wasn't just attending a party. It was proving to himself that he could be vulnerable and still be accepted. Later that night, we slipped away to the garden, away from the chatter and clinking glasses. The moonlight painted the leaves silver, and the night smelled faintly of jasmine. "I'm scared," Franklin admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "About what?" I asked, holding him close. "A Buddhist. About letting myself be happy again," he said, trembling slightly in my arms. "You're allowed to be scared," I said softly. "But you're not alone. Not anymore." He rested his forehead against mine. "I don't want to be alone," he whispered. "Not with you." "I don't want that either," I said. And in that quiet night, everything else fell away. The past, the fears, the doubts, they didn't matter. All that mattered was here, now, the fragile, beautiful possibility of something real. Time passed, and with it came small, miraculous transformations. Franklin laughed more freely, trusted more openly, allowed himself moments of joy without guilt. And I, too, discovered that love didn't have to be perfect or easy. It simply had to exist, tender and persistent, growing in its own time. We celebrated anniversaries in simple ways: a shared meal, a walk in the park, a quiet evening listening to records. We held hands in public, laughed in private, and slowly, the scars of past heartbreak faded into the background. They were still there, yes, but they no longer defined us. One rainy afternoon, we found ourselves at the city's botanical garden, rain tapping softly against the glass roof. Franklin looked at me, eyes bright, and I could see a light I hadn't seen before, the light of someone who had found a home for his heart. "Lennox," he said, voice trembling slightly, "I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to face it with you." "You'll never have to face it alone," I replied. "We'll figure it out together, one day at a time." He smiled, the kind of smile that reaches the soul, and leaned into me. "Thank you for not giving up on me," he whispered. "And thank you for letting me," I replied. The real beauty of our story wasn't in grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was in quiet mornings and gentle conversations, in laughter after tears, in the steady presence of two hearts willing to heal together. Love, I realized, wasn't about never falling. It was about finding someone willing to catch you when you did, over and over again. On a crisp autumn evening, Franklin and I sat by the river, watching the leaves drift on the water. He rested his head on my shoulder, and I felt the rhythm of his heartbeat against mine. For the first time in years, I didn't feel fear or hesitation. I felt complete. "You've changed me," he said softly, voice tinged with awe. "And you've changed me," I replied, squeezing his hand gently. We sat in silence, the city lights sparkling like distant stars, the river flowing endlessly before us. And I realized that love wasn't about fixing someone or being fixed. It was about standing together, weathering storms, and celebrating the small, tender victories. Franklin looked up at me, eyes glimmering with hope. "I think I'm ready to let myself be happy," he said. "You already are," I said. And in that moment, under the quiet glow of streetlights and autumn leaves, I understood something profound. Love wasn't a perfect story. It wasn't flawless or easy. It was messy, fragile, terrifying, and utterly beautiful. And I had found it, unexpected, fragile, and real, in the boy with a broken heart at my brother's wedding. We leaned into each other, hands entwined, hearts beating in a shared rhythm, knowing that whatever came next, we would face it together. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of love. Because Franklin had shown me that even broken hearts could find their way home.